It all began one silent morning in a forgotten corner of Mexico. There was no lightning, there was no thunder, just a sky that suddenly seemed to look down. Doña Rosalia, a 76-year-old woman accustomed to getting up before dawn to pray the rosary, was the first to notice. She wasn't looking for signs. I didn't expect miracles. I just wanted to talk to the Virgin like I had done since I was a child. But that morning, the sky was not the same. There was a light, she said, a light that was not of this world, a presence that cannot be seen with the eyes, but it is felt with the soul. Rosalia wasn't crazy. I wasn't a fan either. He was one of those simple souls who, without knowing it, have the faith of the prophets. That light did not last more than 3 minutes. There were no photographs. There were no official witnesses. Just an old woman with a trembling heart and the certainty that the Virgin had descended without warning. The next day, the networks were talking about the northern lights in places where they had never been seen. Others spoke of solar failures, but nothing explained what Rosalia felt. And she wasn't the only one. In different villages, hundreds of miles apart, elderly people, children, and even people far from the faith said they felt a weight in the air, an inner shudder, as if something invisible were passing through them. What was it? Why did only some people notice it? Days later, a retired priest, Father Tomas, found a fragment of an old diary in the sacristy of his parish, a forgotten text hidden between the pages of an old missal. He said, "When heaven begins to speak again, it will not be with audible words, but with signs for the soul. And Mexico will see first what others will deny later." Father Tomas, surprised, looked for the origin of that text. No author found, no date found. Just one symbol at the bottom of the page, a crowned M, crossed by a ray of light. The same symbol that same night appeared drawn on the ground in front of the house of a woman who was praying for her missing son. Coincidences? Or maybe heaven has started speaking again, but only a few are listening. A chain began to form. Anonymous witnesses, prophetic dreams, sensations that were repeated like echoes, a warmth in the chest, an inner voice, an unexplained urgency. A young woman in Chiapas recounted that when she looked up at the sky, she saw for a moment a woman's face wrapped in light. A woman with no visible mouth, but with a gaze that spoke directly to the soul. A child in Michoacán unknowingly drew the same symbol as Father Tomas's diary, saying that a lady in white showed it to him in a dream. A 60-year-old nurse, a lifelong atheist, began praying in secret after seeing clear tears flowing from the eyes of an antique statue of the Virgin. Something is happening, and it's starting with the little ones, for the simple ones, for those who still wake up to pray, even if no one sees them. But why Mexico? Why is this mixed-race nation wounded by violence, forgotten by many? Would it be the starting point of a new revelation? Perhaps because it was here where a virgin with an indigenous face conquered hearts without a sword. Perhaps because, although many move away, there are still old people who pray with tears, mothers who pray for their children, and children who keep the faith without understanding it. The lady knows where there are still hidden embers, and it's blowing on them. Rosalia now prays at dawn with a small lit candle. He says that the light of that day was not just a vision, it was a promise, a sweet warning, a silent warning that something very big is approaching, and it begins in the soul of those who know how to listen. But the most surprising thing happened a week later. Rosalia woke up with a clear phrase in her mind. It wasn't his thought. It wasn't a dream. It was an inner voice that said, "Mexico will see, but before seeing, you must believe." Rosalia wrote this phrase down on a piece of paper and kept it inside the Bible, next to an old picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. She didn't tell anyone until a priest from another region came knocking on her door and said, "I have a message, and they told me that I should look for a woman who keeps words in her Bible." Coincidence? when everything seems like noise, when the news screams, when fear takes over the air. This is where Mary's voice does not impose itself, but whispers, a whisper that cannot be heard with the ears, but with a wounded heart, a gentle call that crosses walls, borders, and ages. And like a seed, it settles in the souls of those who are still fertile soil. During a storm in Veracruz, with winds that blew away roofs and uprooted trees, an 82-year-old woman named Estella clung to an image of the Virgin of Carmen. He didn't ask for miracles. He did not demand explanations. He just pressed the picture against his chest and said, "I'm here, Mother. Do what you want." Amidst the roar of the wind, a strange silence surrounded her for seconds, as if everything had been suspended. And in that brief moment, Estella felt, without knowing how to explain it, that Maria was talking to him. There were no words, there were no sentences, only one certainty: you are not alone. I am with you. That same day, hundreds of kilometers away, a young man named Andrew, who had been away from the faith for decades, he mistakenly entered a small ruined chapel. He was seeking shelter from the rain. But what he found was an ancient, broken image of the Virgin of the Remedies. Seeing her, he felt something he couldn't understand. His knees trembled, and for the first time in years, his lips uttered a prayer he didn't even remember knowing. Holy Mary, Mother of God. Why does this happen? Why, right in the middle of the chaos, when all seems lost, does anyone hear a soft voice that makes them fall to their knees? Because the Virgin does not scream, it does not demand, it does not threaten. She waits, and at the exact moment when the soul surrenders, speaks the language of tears, of silence, of maternal love. Mexico has been wounded, land of martyrs, of deep faith, but also of violence, injustice, abandonment. And yet, in the darkest moments of its history, Mary has spoken. In the Cristero War, in earthquakes, in the silent persecutions, there was always someone, an old woman, an orphan child, a hidden priest who heard her. And today, that voice has sounded again. It's not a physical voice, it's not recorded, it's not broadcast on television. But those who hear it, they are never the same again. A cloistered nun in Tlaxcala wrote in her diary, "I didn't see his face, I didn't hear any words, but it was as if a mother hugged me from the inside and said, 'Trust, even if everything trembles.'" A retired soldier, his soul hardened by war, he cried for the first time in years when he touched a Marian medal he found among the rubble of an abandoned church. A child with autism who never spoke, he looked at an image of Mary, help of Christians, and whispered, she sings softly. And you, have you heard it? Have you felt that sweet presence that does not judge, does not demand, does not punish? Because she doesn't come with swords, it comes with light, with consolation, with tenderness. And in the midst of chaos, where many see only destruction, she sees possibility. She sees souls that can blossom, hearts that can heal, nations that can kneel again and become beacons of faith. It is said that when Fatima was burning inside, when Medjugorje was not yet known, Mexico was already burning with the silent fire of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and his voice has not stopped ringing. Only many have stopped listening, but now something is changing. Ancient echoes are returning, hard souls begin to break, and in the middle of the rubble, Maria's whisper becomes clearer. Perhaps that is why so many testimonies are beginning to emerge. Letters without a sender, voices in dreams, mysterious phrases written by children who never learned to write. Phrases like, "She comes when everything is silent. She cries where no one else sees. She is waiting for you in the place where it hurt you the most." Impossible sentences, but they resonate in the soul, as if they were ancient memories of a mother who never left. And you who hear these words, maybe you're starting to feel something, a mild burning sensation in the chest, a nostalgia for something you didn't know you had lost, a feeling that you are not alone. You are not, because she is. because his voice has not been silenced. Only now is beginning to rise, and this time it will no longer be just a whisper for a few. This time, it will be a call for an entire nation, or sign. There's an ancient whisper in the heart of Mexico, an echo that does not come from books or pulpits, but of an image that has been looking in silence for almost 500 years. Juan Diego's tilma, that humble cloth that covered the shoulders of a simple indigenous person, has become the most ignored prophetic code of our time. Because while many see only a beautiful image, others, those who look with their soul, they begin to notice that in their colors, in their stars, in their eyes, there are messages waiting to be read. It is not a matter of superstition or exaggeration. This is something that has been there since 1531, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to understand it. The Virgin of Guadalupe did not speak with screams or thunder. He only left an image, a sign. But in that sign, there are secrets. In 1929, a photographer made a disturbing discovery. In the eyes of the Virgin, when making an extreme approach, the figure of a kneeling man was reflected. Decades later, by applying more advanced digital techniques, scientists found in his pupils the complete scene of the moment when Juan Diego showed the tilma to the bishop. An entire scene reflected in the eyes of an image that, according to science, was not painted by human hand. Who keeps a scene in their eyes for almost 5 centuries? Who reveals in silence what the voices have wanted to forget? But that's not all. Researchers discovered that the stars on the Virgin's mantle correspond to the sky of Mexico exactly as it was on December 12, 1531, in the early hours of dawn. That is to say, the image shows the sky seen from God's point of view, looking towards the earth, not the other way around. An inverted celestial map, a message. I come from heaven, I see from above, I know the eternal plan. And what is that plan? What is encoded in the tilma? What did Mary want to tell us in that unique act of leaving her image engraved? Some experts in Marian theology have begun to link the tilma with the third secret of Fatima, because both messages, although distant in time and space, they share the same tone, urgency, conversion, and the call to consecrate oneself to the Immaculate Heart. Many believe that the image of Guadalupe was not only a gift for the indigenous people, but a visual prophecy for the future of all America. The Virgin did not ask for temples. He did not demand monuments. He just said, "Am I not here, I who am your mother?" And that here, did you mean only Tepeyac or maybe an entire nation, to an entire continent? In the 21st century, when churches are emptying, when the noise of social media drowns out prayer, the image remains. And in her silence, she screams louder than ever. The wise ignore it, the powerful despise her, but the simple ones, those who kneel without fear, those who still light a candle with faith, they begin to understand. A group of Catholic astronomers recently published an article. They said that the constellations on the mantle have an arrangement that coincides with passages from the Apocalypse, particularly with chapter 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under his feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Coincidence? Or living prophecy? Could it be that the Virgin of Guadalupe came not only as consolation, but as a silent warning? In recent years, strange testimonies have begun to circulate. A woman in Morelos claims to have heard, while praying in front of the image, an inner voice that told him, "In my cloak, I keep the destiny of your people." A child in Hidalgo, upon visiting the basilica, innocently asked, "And when will he open his eyes?" A priest in Jalisco claims that in the middle of Mass, looking at the image, he felt her looking back at him as if he were about to speak. All this is not superstition. It is spiritual sensitivity. It is that point where the soul begins to awaken and to recognize that the story of Guadalupe is not yet over. In fact, it could be that the most important part is about to begin. Because if the Virgin of Fatima spoke of Russia, if the Virgin of Medjugorje speaks of the world, the Virgin of Guadalupe spoke to the heart of Mexico, and there may be a second part to that message, not yet revealed. In ancient codices, symbols linked to Tepeyac are mentioned that have not yet been decoded. In the fibers of the tilma, there are no human brushstrokes. There is no mixing of pigments, and yet the colors have not faded in 500 years. Who holds that image? And why is it still intact? Right now, when do we need a miracle the most? Something is coming, and many hearts know it, even if they can't explain it. The tilma is not just a souvenir. It is a living prophecy, a heavenly letter that is still being read for those who dare to look with faith. And what he says, it is deeper than any speech, because in his silence she seems to say, "He who has eyes that I see," because what's coming, it's already beginning. It was an ordinary afternoon in a small mountain village. The clouds walked slowly over the hills, and the wind played among the branches of the old trees. But in the midst of that daily calm, a child, whose name no one remembers for sure, received a secret that was not his, but from heaven. I was no more than 9 years old, quiet, with a deep gaze, with that sacred silence that children sometimes have when they have seen things that adults could not bear. He lived with his grandmother, a widow who spent her days weaving in the dirt yard, always with a lit candle in front of a small image of the Virgin of Guadalupe. One morning, the boy woke up different, with his eyes wide open as if he had seen something he didn't know how to explain. He sat on the edge of the bed, without speaking. During breakfast, he didn't touch his bread. I just looked at the sky, as if he was waiting for the presence that had visited him during the night to return. 2 days passed like this, until he took a pencil and an old notebook, and he wrote. I couldn't write well, but what he drew on that paper was strange. Symbols, words in capital letters, and a phrase repeated 3 times. She comes with the wind, she comes with the wind, she comes with the wind. The grandmother, seeing the notebook, felt a chill. It wasn't fear, it was reverence. The next day the boy spoke. He said that a lady had visited him in his dream. A lady dressed in deep blue, with stars on her cloak. He didn't walk, he floated, and when he tried to ask her name, she replied, "I am the one who knows your pain, and also the pain of your land." And he told her things, words he couldn't quite repeat, but he kept it in drawings, in gestures, in his long silences. He said that the lady showed him a city on fire, and then the same city wrapped in light, full of people kneeling, praying together, and a clear sky like never before. He told me that both visions were possible, but it all depends on how much we listen to his call. The boy's story began to circulate among the neighbors. Some mocked, others were afraid. A few, the simplest, began to gather every evening to pray with him. The boy didn't talk much. It just said, "Let us pray. She will come when we are ready." One day, a woman brought her sick daughter. The doctors gave him no hope. The boy promised nothing. He just took her hand, prayed silently, and said, "She's already here." After 3 days, the girl began to improve, and after a week, was healthy. Then the village priest arrived. He wanted to talk to the child. He asked him to repeat what the Virgin had told him. The child did not want to. He just handed her a sheet of paper with a short message. The heart of Mexico is being put to the test. If you do not return to prayer, days of great darkness will come. But if he turns his face to the Mother, heaven will show its mercy. The priest, upon reading it, turned pale, because that same phrase, word for word, I had dreamed it 2 weeks earlier, and I hadn't told anyone. The news reached the media, but the story was treated as a psychological phenomenon. Experts said the boy was influenced by his religious grandmother, that his drawings were a product of a child's imagination, that everything could be explained with science. But then things began to happen that no one could explain. A Marian image that began to exude the scent of roses, a rosary that glowed faintly during night prayers, and more than 10 people claimed to have heard, while praying with the child, a soft, singing voice coming from the wind. But the most shocking thing happened on May 13th. The child disappeared. His grandmother searched for him all over town. He was not in the house, nor in the church, nor on the hill. They only found his notebook open on the table with a message that seemed to be written in another handwriting. "He has already done his part. Now it's your turn." They never found him. No one heard from him again. Some say he was taken to another town. Others believe that he simply returned to the place where his message came from. Since then, in that small town, every 13th of the month, a crowd gathers in the humble chapel to pray the rosary. Miracles never cease, conversions increase. And those who have gone, they claim to feel a peace that is impossible to describe. An unbelieving visitor wrote in his diary, "I don't know if the child existed. I don't know if the lady visited him. But as I kneeled down in that place, I felt something very tall hugging me, and for the first time I felt I had nothing to fear anymore." Who was that boy? Where did it come from? And why was he the one chosen to receive the secret? Maybe because the purest hearts, they are the ones that can carry such large messages without corrupting them. Maybe because in times where no one listens, heaven continues to trust in the little ones, and the secret still alive, in his drawings, in the words he left, in the voice that some still hear on silent nights. A voice says, "She comes with the wind, and with it, the decision is coming." Mexico, land of sleeping volcanoes and awakened hearts, a nation wounded and yet full of promise, a country where pain and hope have learned to coexist under the same sky. And maybe that's why it is precisely here that heaven's gaze has focused most insistently. For centuries, there has been something in Mexico that draws the attention of the divine. Not only for her Marian apparitions, not only because of the miracles recorded in ancient documents, but for something much deeper, the hidden faith of its people, the one that is not seen in the temples, but on home altars, in the worn rosaries, in the tears shed in silence. Maria knows it. That's why he chose Tepeyac. He did not seek Rome. He did not descend in Jerusalem. He chose a humble indigenous man on a dusty hill to give a message that over the centuries still burns like a living ember. But now something is changing. Times are accelerating. The signs are increasing. And again, heaven's gaze falls upon Mexico. Chance, destination, or part of a plan we don't fully understand yet. A group of cloistered nuns in a convent in Querétaro, he claims to have received nocturnal visions during the adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. They say they saw a large white cloud descending over the country, and inside it, a female figure stretching out her arms. Not as someone who complains, but as one who embraces an entire nation. In his chest shone a luminous heart, and on their lips a prayer that none of them could understand because it was too sweet, too perfect, too heavenly. At the other end of the country, in Baja California, a farmer discovered in his agave field an image marked on the ground, a female silhouette with a cloak, similar, almost identical, to the Virgin of Guadalupe. Experts said it was an optical illusion, but the man on his knees only replied, "She came to see us. I felt it before I saw her. What's going on? Why do these signals increase? And why right now?" Some mystics agree that Mexico is not only a blessed land, it is also proven land. Because when God chooses, also purifies. And when heaven looks, also awaits a response. Many wonder why Mary would choose this nation again, with its problems, their corruption, their daily violence. But it is precisely in the midst of darkness where the faith of the simple shines most. In every market where a mother prays for her missing son. In every ranch where a grandfather teaches his grandchildren to pray the rosary. In every poor neighborhood where a candle burns night after night in front of a faded image. There, it is where heaven sees what the world despises. A priest in Chiapas shared a recent vision. I saw a great cross of light suspended over Mexico. It was not a threat, it was a lighthouse. And I heard a soft voice saying, "From this land will come comfort to other nations." Many believe that Mexico will be a refuge, that when the tribulation reaches other continents, it will be this country, despite its wounds, the one who will open her arms like a mother who does not judge. And it will be Marian faith that sustains what the world can no longer sustain. But that mission cannot be accomplished if the country remains asleep. It is necessary to wake up, return to prayer, rescuing spiritual roots that have been forgotten. Because heaven's gaze is not indifferent, it is an urgent invitation. And if Mexico responds, the impossible will be possible. Recent testimonies claim to have seen in dreams a virgin weeping blood in front of a map of Mexico, not with anger, not with desperation, but with the pain of a mother who loves and is ready to warn before the storm arrives. A woman in Oaxaca wrote the following after her experience: "She showed me the country as an open wound, and then he showed me that same wound full of flowers." That's what heaven sees in Mexico, a wound, but also a garden, a country that can flourish if he surrenders to his mother again. The Virgin is not seeking perfection. He is looking for willing hearts. He doesn't need golden temples, needs bent knees. He doesn't want big statues, but humble souls who say, "Here I am, Mother." And then heaven's gaze will not be just observation, will be protection. Because when Mary looks, also acts, and when her son sees that his mother intercedes for a people, miracles begin. Something is about to begin, and Mexico is not excluded. On the contrary, he's in the center, because among its mountains, its deserts, its noisy cities, and its forgotten villages, there is a new murmur, a soft call, a presence that runs from north to south, a wind that doesn't come from the weather, but from heaven. And in that wind, she comes. They say that when a mother cries, it is because the pain has pierced the soul. And when the Mother of Heaven cries, it's not because of her, it's for us. Throughout history, images of the Virgin Mary weeping have appeared, sometimes tears of water, other times, inexplicably, tears of blood. And although many deny it, although others mock it or call it mass hysteria, those who have been present at those moments, they know what they have seen and what they have felt, because it is not just a physical phenomenon, it is an open wound in heaven that for a few seconds can be seen on earth. In a humble parish in Michoacan, a small image of the Virgin of Sorrows began to get wet every time the rosary was prayed for lost souls. First, there were drops. Then, tears ran down her neck. And finally, a reddish trail that no expert could explain. The faithful who witnessed the event did not come out shouting miracle. There were no cameras or broadcasts, only silence and a deep tremor in the heart. An old woman, seeing the tears, fell to her knees and whispered, "Forgive us, Mother. You are showing us what we don't want to see." What do those tears mean? Some people think they are warnings, others, who are called desperate, but they all agree on one thing, are not a coincidence. Every time a Marian image has cried, the world has been on the verge of radical change. In Syria, before the war, an image of the Virgin began to weep oil in front of hundreds of people. In Nicaragua, before the armed conflict, a virgin in a humble chapel shed black tears. And in Mexico, Mary's tears have begun to appear again, silent, discreet, like the whispers of a mother watching her children walk towards the abyss, but still waiting for them to turn around. Why would the Virgin cry? Not for her, but by children who are never born, families that are destroyed by pride, the souls that are lost through indifference, the prayers that are no longer said. Churches are empty while shopping malls are filling up, for those who no longer believe, and even more for those who no longer want to believe. A Franciscan priest who witnessed a case of tears in an image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help said in his homily, "She doesn't come to curse, he comes to cry with us." but also to cry for us. And when the mother cries, it is because the son has already decided to act. His words resonated in the hearts of those who heard him. And that night, the church was packed like it hadn't been for decades. A young woman in Monterey reported that she dreamed of the Virgin in a deserted chapel. The image was crying, and in its hands it held an incomplete rosary. Only 5 accounts. When the young woman asked why the others were missing, the Virgin replied, "The prayers that no longer give me are missing." That dream was not taken lightly, because the next morning, an entire family returned to the faith after more than 20 years. It is no coincidence. Mary's tears are not just signs. They are bridges, bridges between human indifference and divine mercy, bridges that are only crossed on knees with an open heart and the will surrendered. But how many are willing to see those tears? How many are willing to let themselves be touched by that heavenly sadness? Because it's easier to look the other way. It's easier to say, "That's not real." It is more comfortable to think that everything has a scientific explanation. But those who have witnessed the crying of Mary, they know it's not about science, but of conscience. And that consciousness is waking up. More and more people are telling stories of intimate encounters with the Virgin, not in spectacular visions, but in small details. A candle that lights itself during prayer, a scent of roses where there are no flowers, a sudden peace in the midst of a crisis, a hardened heart that inexplicably begins to cry. All of these are invisible tears of Mary, tears that cannot be seen, but are felt, tears that do not wet the image, but they wet the soul. In Guadalajara, a young man far from the faith visited the church out of commitment. As he walked down the aisle, his eyes met those of an image of Our Lady of the Rosary, and suddenly he felt something hugging him from inside. He started crying for no reason. I couldn't explain it. Days later, he wrote in his diary, "I don't know if I saw tears on his face or if the ones I saw were mine reflected in her eyes." That is the greatness of Mary. She does not impose. She doesn't demand. She cries for us so that we wake up before it's too late. And her tears are not of defeat. They are of hope, because a mother who cries, she is a mother who still waits. There are words that move, others that console, some that heal. But there is a name that awakens heaven and makes hell tremble, a name that was not written in marble, but in the hearts of those who have loved unconditionally, suffered in silence, and confident beyond understanding. That name is Maria. It's not just another name. It is not a simple religious symbol. It's a key, an invisible sword, a shield that cannot be seen, but has protected millions in times when all seemed lost. When a soul cries out Mary, he doesn't do it from theory, but from deep need, from the cry of the son who seeks his mother. There are testimonies in every corner of the world. People who, in the event of an accident, an earthquake, a tragedy, he shouted only one word, Maria, and something changed. It wasn't magic, it was an intervention. A young woman who fell into a ravine in Chiapas without the possibility of being rescued. He repeated the name of the Virgin throughout the night. Mary, Mary, Mary. And when they found her the next day, he didn't have a single broken bone. Rescuers said it was impossible, but she only replied, "Someone held me." Who's in hospitals, where medicine is no longer enough, in prisons, where guilt weighs more than chains, on battlefields where death lurks around every corner. That same whisper has been heard over and over again. Maria, don't leave me. And she doesn't let. It doesn't go away. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't give up, because his name not only invokes his presence, but his promise. And what is that promise? I will never leave alone the one who calls on me with faith. I will go to meet the one who calls me with love. I will cover with my mantle anyone who calls my name in the darkness. Many have forgotten it. Many no longer pray. But heaven continues to respond to the cry of whom he still remembers his mother's name. In a town in Guerrero, during a night of violence, a mother locked herself and her children under the bed. As gunfire filled the street, she clutched a broken rosary and began to say in a low voice, "Mary, Mary, Mary." Her children, trembling, imitated her. And something changed in that room. The tension was broken. Fear turned into peace. And at dawn, when they left, everything was intact. Nobody knows why. But that mother does know. It was her. She covered us with her name. Because that name, so simple and so powerful, it's not just a sound. It is a presence. The saints knew it. St. Bernard said, "In temptations, in anguish, in doubts, call upon Mary. May his name never leave your lips, nor from your heart." And it wasn't poetry. It was experience. An exorcist priest in Jalisco confessed that, in the midst of a difficult liberation, the demon screamed furiously, "Don't say that name! That name burns me!" He did not speak of the name of Jesus, but of Mary, because where she enters, the enemy flees. She doesn't fight with weapons. You don't need to raise your voice. His mere presence is enough. That's why his name has been attacked, ridiculed, forgotten, because the enemy knows what it means. He knows that a nation that calls on Mary again, it is a nation that rises, that is resurrected, who is reborn in God. Mexico has always known it, from Tepeyac to the present day. The name of Mary has been on the lips of martyrs, in the sighs of the sick, in the promises of lovers, in the cries for help of the desperate. And now, that name needs to be put back in its place, not in the statues, not on the cold walls, but in the heart of his people. Because he who pronounces Mary opens the door to the miracle, and whoever repeats Mary in the midst of pain invites heaven to descend. A Mexican mystic wrote in her diary, "When I am in danger, I do not defend myself with arguments nor with force. I'm just saying, 'Mary, Mother, walk before me,' and I never walk alone." That's the secret. That is the hidden power. And you, that you are reading or listening to these words, how long has it been since the last time that you called your mother by her name? How long has it been since you just said, "Maria, help me. Maria, don't let me go. Maria, come with me"? You don't need complicated formulas, no long sentences, only a sincere heart, a true sigh, one word, Maria. And when he said it, something will move. You may not see it, you may not feel it right away, but in the invisible world, heaven will awaken, because when a son calls his mother, the mother comes, always. Not everything that glitters comes from God, and not all darkness is seen with the eyes. We live in times where the enemy no longer disguises himself as a monster, but of distraction, of comfort, of everything is fine. And while many believe they are at peace, their souls are being slowly sedated for traps that do not sound like sin, but they disconnect the heart from heaven. Yes, the enemy no longer needs to scream, now whisper. You no longer need to openly pursue, now convince gently. And their most powerful strategy isn't fear, but oblivion, forgetfulness of God, forgetfulness of the Virgin, forgetting prayer, forgetfulness of the soul. An elderly lady in Puebla said that one day, when she turned off the television after watching soap operas for hours, he heard a clear voice inside his chest that said, "Did you realize you didn't think about me even once today?" She knew who had spoken. It was the voice of heaven, and he knelt down to cry, not out of fear, but because she understood that the enemy had her entertained while her soul was emptying. The devil no longer needs to lead you into a cult. It's enough to make you believe that praying is boring, that the rosary is for fanatics, that silence is a waste of time, that everyone has their own truth, and that God understands everything. Of course God understands, but also waits. And when the soul does not seek it, someone else will come to occupy that space. Has it ever happened to you that days go by without talking to God, without looking at an image of the Virgin with sincere love, without stopping to be thankful for being alive? That's no coincidence. It's strategy. It's part of the invisible plan to put your soul to sleep while the world burns. Because if the enemy cannot possess you, will try to distract you. And if he can't distract you, will seek to wear you down. A young woman in Ciudad Juarez recounted that she gradually stopped praying. First one night, then two. Afterwards, he only prayed when he felt guilty, until one day I no longer felt guilty. No need, not even love, just empty. And that emptiness, she said, was like death, but with the living body. That is the ultimate goal of the enemy, that your soul dies before you die physically. But he does it silently. It gives you thousands of options: cell phone, news, entertainment, anger, petty vices. Nothing that seems serious, nothing to shock. Just things that steal your time. They cool your faith and they move you away 1 centimeter per day. Until one day you wake up far away from God without realizing when it started. Did you know that the saints said that the devil fears silent prayer more than exorcism? Because in silence, the soul meets its creator. And when the soul sees its truth before God, nothing can stop your transformation. That's why the enemy hates it when you pray. That's why it distracts you every time you want to start. That's why it makes noise just when you decide to kneel. A woman in Veracruz says that every time she picked up the rosary, her cell phone rang. Always a useless call, an offer, something silly. Until he understood that is no coincidence. It's sabotage. And he made the decision to turn everything off when he prays. And since then he says he feels like his house has become something else. More peace, less anger, more peaceful dreams. Because when the soul resumes prayer, the enemy loses territory. Another invisible trap: resentment. Many people think that hating the person who hurt them is normal, but they don't know that resentment is hell's favorite poison. Because it makes you feel justified, but it keeps you tied up. And while you hold a grudge, you cannot receive grace. Because grace does not enter closed hearts. A grandmother in Hidalgo had been fighting with her sister for years. One day, while praying the rosary, felt a huge weight on his chest, and he heard, "Forgive before it's too late." That night he called his sister. They cried together, and the next day, the sister died suddenly. She always says, "The Virgin saved me from carrying that pain for the rest of my life." Another subtle trap: pride disguised as spirituality. Believing that by going to Mass, we are already fine, that by praying, we have already fulfilled, and look down on those who do not believe. But Mary teaches us humility, because she who was Queen of Heaven, she called herself the servant of the Lord. And as long as we do not learn to be humble, the enemy will be able to deceive us with flattery. And how to avoid these traps? Pray every day, even if you don't feel like it. Confess frequently to empty your heart. Forgive unconditionally, even if it costs you. Avoid unnecessary noise to hear God. Invoke the name of Mary, because where she is, the enemy flees. Invisible traps are not overcome with strength, but with light. And the Virgin is that lamp lit in the night of the soul. She shows you where the ties are, where is the poison, and how to break it with his Son. But for that, you have to let yourself be looked at. You have to let yourself be touched. You have to become a child again and say, "Mother, don't let me fall. Show me what I can't see. Protect me from myself." Because sometimes the worst enemy is oblivion. Forget who you are. Forgetting who your mother is. Forgetting where you come from and where you were going. When everything falls apart, when there is no longer strength to continue, when the soul feels empty, only one thing remains standing: the promise. But not just any promise, not that of the world, not that of the politician, nor the doctor, nor the friend who says, "I'll be here," and then leaves. We are talking about a promise that comes from heaven, a word given by the Virgin that has never failed. From the first moment that Mary accepted her mission with a yes, she also took on a divine responsibility: be mother of all. And a mother does not forget. A mother doesn't give up. A mother does not abandon. Therefore, when Mary promises, the soul can rest. Many times we have been promised things, that everything will get better, that the disease will heal, that the sadness will pass. But many times, those promises are broken. We feel betrayed, solos, disillusioned. And then, with a broken heart, we look up and ask, is there anyone who won't lie to me? Is there any promise left that can still sustain me? Yeah, there is one, and it comes from her. At Fatima, Our Lady said, "In the end, my immaculate heart will triumph." Those words were not poetic, they were not symbolic, they were a prophecy. And if you haven't seen that triumph yet, it's not because I failed, it's because we're still on the way. In Medjugorje, the echo of another promise is repeated. "Dear children, if you knew how much I love you, you would cry for joy." That love is not passive, that love is not limited to observing. That love acts, protege, guide, and it delivers. Mary has never promised a life without pain, but he has promised not to leave us alone in our pain, and so changes everything. A woman in San Luis Potosi, after losing her husband and son in less than 6 months, wrote in a letter, "I was on the verge of taking my own life, but one night, kneeling down not knowing what to say, I felt someone hug me. I didn't see anything, but inside me I heard loudly, 'I'm with you. Do not be afraid. This cross will be your resurrection.'" From then on, he began to pray the rosary every day. And although his pain is still there, he says he now has peace. That is Mary's promise, accompany you until you have light again. But there is another promise, one that we find harder to believe because she looks too beautiful. "None of those who consecrate themselves to me with sincere love will be lost." He said that in multiple appearances, and he has fulfilled it. It doesn't mean you won't fall. It doesn't mean you won't step away at times. It means she's coming for you, again and again, until I find you. Did you know that many people sentenced to death in Latin American prisons have they converted before dying, thanks to the Virgin? Did you know that even convinced atheists have had such a profound inner experience? Who, weeping, have surrendered themselves to God in their last breath? And it all started with something small. Someone prayed for them. Someone consecrated them to Mary without them knowing it. That's another promise fulfilled. To those entrusted to me, I will claim them as mine in the end. A mother in Argentina prayed for 30 years for her son who became a Satanist. Every night he said to the Virgin, "It's not mine, it's yours. I can't do it anymore, but you can." The son died in an accident, and when they found him, he had a rosary in his hand. Who put it there? Nobody knows, but she does know. Mary kept her promise. Another promise. To those who pray my rosary with faith, I promise my daily protection. A young woman on a bus that was robbed in Sinaloa, he said that while everyone was shouting, she closed her eyes and prayed the rosary in silence. The assailant looked at her, pointed at her, and lowered the gun. He didn't do anything to her. Later she said that there was a woman next to her, a woman in white, who prevented him from moving. Was it a hallucination, or was it the promise in action? Because when Mary promises, it does not depend on your merit. It depends on your loyalty. And she has never failed. Never. Not even once. So what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for to consecrate yourself to his heart? What are you waiting for to repeat that promise with faith? What are you waiting for to surrender your pain, your fears, your doubts? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to say, "Mary, I trust. Fulfill your promise to me." And she will. Maybe not how you expect, maybe not in the time you want, but he will, because Mary does not forget. Do not neglect. He doesn't lie. And most importantly, never arrives late. In a world that is changing by leaps and bounds, where uncertainty seems to rule every day, there is a secret place, an invisible fortress where dwells that which can never be destroyed, unshakable faith. That faith is not a mere passing emotion. It is not the momentary enthusiasm that arises after good news. It is a flame that burns deep within the soul, that neither wind nor storm can extinguish. Mary invites us to discover that strength. Let us not build it on our own strength, but in the love that comes to us from above, because the world can collapse, but the love of God, manifested in his mother, it is the anchor that holds in the middle of the hurricane. The saints have spoken of that sacred place. It is the heart willing to trust without limits. It is the soul that opens to grace without fear. It is the will that, even if it falls 1,000 times, he gets up 1,001. Many wonder how to achieve that faith. The answer is not simple, but yes, clear, is in total surrender. In saying yes, even when the plans are not understood, in embracing the cross with hope, and in seeking Mary as a guide and refuge. An old man in a remote village in southern Mexico who faced the loss of all his loved ones, he confessed that what sustained him was that unshakable faith. When asked how he found her, he replied with tears, "I did not seek her in words. I searched for her in the silence of my heart, and I found her in the name of Mary, because she is the final key, the key that opens the door to that place where nothing can be destroyed, where love conquers hate, where hope never dies, where peace reigns even in the midst of chaos." The third secret of Fatima, so often feared, it is not a hopeless threat. It is a call to build that inner refuge. It is an invitation that, in the midst of darkness, turn on the light that no one can turn off. And that light is called faith. Faith that is born from the Virgin, who is a mother, protector, and warrior, who walks with us when the road becomes inhospitable, who holds our hand when our strength fails. Imagine for a moment that everyone in Mexico and in the world, they would unite in that unbreakable faith. May every family, every community, every person light his heart with that eternal flame. What would happen? What internal and external earthquakes could withstand that light? Who could steal that peace? It is not a utopian dream, it is a prophetic call. Because when the invisible becomes visible, when the soul awakens, history changes. And you, where are you now? Have you found that place yet? Or are you still looking outside for what only Mary can give you inside? The final key is not in the books, not even in speeches, nor in spectacular appearances. It's in the simplicity, in the hug you give when no one is looking, in the prayer that comes from the soul, in the humility of asking for help, in the forgiveness that liberates. That is the secret that Mary wants to reveal to us today. That in the middle of the storm, when all seems lost, there is an invincible refuge, an eternal home. And that refuge is the heart that surrenders and trusts, the soul that opens to unconditional love, the mind that decides to believe beyond the evidence. When the Virgin Mary reveals a secret, it is not to alarm, but to wake up, to invite us to find what is never lost, because in it dwells the unbreakable, and where she is, victory is certain.